welcome to Rob from the Internet Talks About Beer, a show where we discuss different styles of beer, beer history, beer flavor profiles. We give shout outs to breweries we think make exceptional beer, and we talk about whatever else comes to mind during the course of the conversation. I'm Rob, and if you like this style of entertainment that I'm doing, I'd appreciate it if you would like this video when it comes out. Maybe subscribe to the channel. I also have a podcast. You can find it wherever you find most podcasts. Just search for Rob from the Internet, and you'll find me. It's not hard. I think I'm the only Rob from the Internet that's listed in any of the directories. So, without further ado, let's get this show started. Joining me today is Craig Bettenhausen. Craig, if you would, tell me a little bit about yourself, how you got into craft beer, and what you do when you're not talking to people like me about craft beer.
Well, sure. Yeah. So my name is Craig Bettenhausen, and my main thing is I'm a reporter for a chemistry magazine called Chemical and Engineering News. And I cover a lot of different things, but beer is among them. I don't get to claim the beer beat all to myself because there's more than one person on the magazine that wants to write about beer. But I've done a number of articles on there, and I did manage to publish a brewing recipe in this, scientific kind of news magazine a couple of years ago.
Nice.
That was a personal win for me. I got into craft brewing. I mean, I kind of did the stereotypical thing where I went to Germany, having mostly drunk like Miller Lite and Bud Light and, Steel Reserve, and then came back with a better palate. I didn't actually drink a lot of diverse beers in Germany, but when I got back, for some reason, I just got more into nicer beers.
Yeah, it's because you tasted better beers when you were in Germany.
Yeah, that's true. And then I'm in Baltimore, and there's a group here called Nepenthe, and they were a homebrew store, and now they've transitioned to being a brew pub. But they had a brewing class you could do there, and they had a brew on premises program, which was really great. So they would, they'd warm up the pot for you. They'd have all the equipment there. You'd use all their stuff, and they would even have somebody there to brew with you.
Nice.
And so I did that a handful of times with some friends and with my dad, and got sort of deeper into it. And then there's a big overlap between like chemists and brewers.
Yep.
So throughout chemistry graduate school, which I did here at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, sort of wandered in more through some of those folks as well.
Awesome. Well, today we're going to be talking about a couple things. We're going to be talking about American style porters, typically the robust porter. And then we're also going to be talking some beer chemistry. Craig's going to be talking beer chemistry. I'm going to be sitting here learning stuff because, as I said to him before we started recording, I don't know a whole lot about beer chemistry. I got into beer brewing the way most people do. I just started playing around and found what worked. And that's how I designed most of my recipes. I mean, I know the real basics of what happens, but beyond that, I just make beer. Awesome. Well, I'm going to start by opening my beer. I'm having from a Toronto area brewery called Muddy York. I'm having their porter, and it's a standard American robust style porter.
Yeah. And so I've got the Mount Clair, which is from Peabody Heights, which is a brewer actually just up the street from me here in Baltimore. And it's also kind of a standard porter, American style. And it's I've had it once or twice before, and I was happy to get it again.
All right, so this one, I mean, this conforms to the typical porter style. It's nice and dark. It's got the tan head. It retains a little bit of that head once you pour it. Huge bit of roasted malt aromas and cocoa on the nose. It smells absolutely delicious.
Yeah, looking at mine, I think I got maybe a little bit of a darker head on this one.
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, I have really bright daylight style lights, so they tend to wash the color out a little bit. Because it's great for when I have beers that are more, I guess, transparent than this,
right?
Because then you can actually see the color profile when I hold it up to the lights, but this one's just dark. I mean, you can see a little bit of red around the edges of the glass there. You can kind of see the red and browns in there, but
I'm catching some of the similar notes from this one. I've got some chocolatey notes and definitely a strong malt going on. The head's pretty fluffy, sticking around for me.
Yeah. So you should be getting some caramel and some like slightly like crackery bread sweetness. Which plays nicely with. You should be getting a slight bit of bitterness from the black malts that they use in it. This beer shouldn't be overly bitter. It's the typical for the style is 25 to 40 IBUs, which is fairly low.
Okay.
Um, I'm not one to like really bitter beers. Like you can keep your West Coast IPAs and things like that. I like my malt forward beers. So when you said you wanted to talk about porters and things like that, it's right in my wheelhouse.
Yeah, man. What I'm liking about this one is it's got a lot of the malt flavor. I don't like a lot of sweetness generally, and kind of the residual malt sweetness is kind of my least favorite kind of beer sweetness. This one's getting a lot of maltiness without those particular sugars, which is nice. I'm not quite sure how they're pulling that off. Might just be a good balance. I mean, just a good balance of hops and grain and things. But
Yeah, it's probably the balance between the main malts they use and the black malt, because black malt's got a sharp slightly bitter flavor to it, which would
yeah,
cut that sweetness quite well.
makes sense.
For people who are interested in this type of thing, the color should be 30 to 40 SRM. That's in the dark to black region. And the alcohol should be anywhere between 5.1 and 6.6 typically. This one comes in at, well, this one's actually a little low. So this one's only at 4.7.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's quite nice. This is the type you could drink a few of these and not feel guilty, because it's not you're not sitting there with an 8, 9, 10%.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I've noticed. I was thinking about this as I was actually went to the store again this morning to get some other choices as well. And I feel like last year we saw a lot of like sessionable IPAs became very popular. Like instead of the big heavy IPAs with 9 points, you started to see 4 points and even 3 point IPAs. And I'm wondering if we're going to see some of that in the dark beers in the winter now this year.
I think so. I mean, the traditional standby Guinness has always been low. It's been
true.
sub 5% forever. I mean, unless you get like the foreign extra or
Right.
whatever. But the standard draft one is I think it's 4.7, 4.8. And we're seeing a trend. At least I've been seeing a trend a lot more towards the lower end of the spectrum for ABV, even into the non-alcoholics. I mean, that's become a huge trend. So, I for one welcome the table beers and the small beers back, because it's nice to be able to have the flavor without necessarily getting yourself smashed too early in the evening.
Right.
So, for people who are wondering, the proper glassware for this is the Nonic pint. At least that's what that's what the
I'm
English
close.
people would say. You're close. You got a Sam Adams glass. That'll do some nice flavors. Typical serving temperature is 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. That would be 12 to 15 degrees centigrade Celsius. So, yeah, so you don't want it too cold, you don't want it too warm. It's not like an imperial stout where you want it close to room temperature. You want this more like cellar temperature. So it's cool. It's not warm, it's not cold, it's just cool. These types of beers, porters and stouts, go well with roasted or grilled meats. So if you're having steak or a burger or something like that, if you're having a grilled cheese sandwich, they go really well with that.
Yeah.
And then things like chocolate ice cream and peanut butter cookies, things like that, they go well with that if you're looking for something to complement the sweetness.
Yeah, I had some, not this one, but a similar one with some just pasta with a heavy Alfredo sauce recently, and that worked well.
Yeah, and it would do well with something like that as well, because there is some bitterness to this, so it'll help cut through some of the richness and fat in your cheese or your cream based sauces for pastas and stuff too. So,
have you ever had an opportunity to like chew on the malts themselves? So I guess you have, because you brew too.
Yeah. I actually brewed it. I have in the fermenters right now. I have what I call my dirty blonde. So it's got a little bit of carapils and a little bit of crystal 40 in it to take the color off from being yellow to being kind of like an ambery color, but it's still really light in body and flavor. And yeah, while I'm milling the grains and stuff, I'll take some, throw it in my mouth and chew on it, because I like it. It's nice and sweet, and some of them can get you in trouble. Don't grab a handful of black malt. Don't grab a handful of chocolate malt. Mix a couple of those in with the other malts when you put it in your mouth. That way you still get the flavor, but you don't get overwhelmed by the bitterness.
Yeah, it never occurred to me to like chew on the malt until I toured the Red Hook Brewery up in New Hampshire,
Hmm.
and they took some out and handed it to the people on the tour, and I was like, oh, this is nice. I think it was a biscuit malt of some kind. So
Yeah.
when I came back, I got some, got it milled at Nepenthe, actually, the same place, and tried to like make breakfast cereal with it. And yeah, the very lighter malts are can make a pleasant breakfast cereal. I had gotten some chocolate malt, and it was repulsive as a breakfast cereal.
Right. Yeah. Because I mean, it's got that roasty coffeeness
Yeah,
and that bitterness to it, which I don't know. I mean, some people might like that in their cereal,
I
but
guess.
I'm not really a coffee person, so
Mm,
I tend to shy away from the beers that are really coffee forward. I mean, if it's something I haven't had, I'll obviously try it just so I can
sure.
see what it's like, but it won't be a go to for me. But then again, if somebody if somebody handed it to me and I didn't have a beer, I'd be like, all right, and
Yeah.
I would suffer through having to drink it.
I think
So
about
yeah,
not
you
liking
should.
coffee, I did take that same bag, having not enjoyed eating it as a cereal and not having any plans for a brew with it, and I put it in through a French press to see if I could make like a coffee substitute with it. I think you could. I think you could. It wasn't
Yeah,
terrible. I guess no worse than like a chicory coffee or some other totally non-coffee substitutes.
yeah, it'd be
So,
more like a tea. I mean,
yeah,
because it's not really a bean; it's a
true.
grain, which is more vegetal, I guess. I don't know, maybe. I'm just pulling stuff out of my ass at this point. So you should some of the flavors you might pull out of something like this is something like that's a grainy or bready. You might pull toffee. Might get some coffee. This one has a little bit of coffee on the back end, not a lot, which is nice. And that comes from the black malts and the chocolate malts that are used in it. You might get caramel. You might get some other, like biscuity or bready sweetnesses in it. You shouldn't get a whole lot of fruity esters off of it. There might be
Yeah,
some, but they should pretty much be overwhelmed by the roasty aroma that you get from it. Um, you know, it should be fairly mouth coating when you drink it, so it should have like a little bit of a
yeah,
residue left in your mouth. Carbonation. This is a style that ranges anywhere from next to nothing carbonation to really high volumes of carbonation. I tend to enjoy the ones that are more on the lower end. I'm a
yeah.
real big fan of like cask style ales. So because of the lower carbonation, it also just means that you can drink more of them without feeling bloated because you don't have all the bubbles in you. So
That
which
makes
is
sense. Yeah,
it's a double edged sword because you can drink more, but you can drink more.
right. There's that risk.
Typical, yeah, typical hops for a beer style like this are like Kent Goldings or Fuggles.
Okay.
Typical malts are Munich, Crystal, Chocolate, and Black Patent, typically. And just your everyday ordinary ale yeast will be just fine if you're making one of these. You could make it with a specialized like an English ale yeast or whatever, or you could just use like what is it, Safale 05. That's their base ale yeast,
Mhm.
and it would work just fine. So
So then something like the one seems like we ended up with pretty similar ones. How much of the malt bill is the specialty malts, the toasted, the dark ones, versus your sort of lighter base malt?
so your lighter base malt, you're going to have like the majority, I think, for this typically for this style is going to be your Munich, Munich malts, and then
Yeah.
with a decent amount of crystal. Probably you're probably looking at like probably like 50 to 60% Munich, if not a little higher. Maybe between the chocolate and the black patent, you might be talking like 5 to 7%, and
Okay.
then the rest made up with the crystal. Because the crystal malt has a fantastic flavor. Provides a nice nuttiness, so you might get that underneath the
Yeah.
chocolate flavors. And then Munich, I mean, Munich's a nice sweet biscuity malt, bready malt. So it's fantastic. It's one of the ones you could literally take a handful and just munch on it all day long.
Yeah. As you were saying that, I was picking up some nice, more bittery aftertaste on this one, which is I like I like a fairly bitter beer, and so I'm enjoying that in this one here.
You'll get that more too as it warms,
Makes sense.
as it gets closer to the ideal temperature. You should start picking up a little bit more of the bitterness on the back end. If it's really cold, it's gonna kind of mask it a little bit. You're just gonna get
Yeah.
the chocolatey flavors, but as it warms, you're gonna get those roasty flavors and the bitterness a little bit more. Um, so yeah, let's transition over towards beer chemistry.
Yeah.
Tell me
So,
what you know, Craig.
I know a fair amount and not enough. One of the just sort of direct transitions is when I did. So a few years ago, we have kind of a back of the magazine. We call it News Scripts, and it's like wackier science. It's
Yep.
less hard hitting, more fun. That's the one where I got the recipe in, and we made it was a fairly dark beer. Let's see. Let me see. What was it? It was an oatmeal coffee stout. That's the one we did for that. We picked that because you see those a lot in nitro beers.
Yes.
And so we were doing a helium beer, and so helium's a lot less soluble even than nitrogen in water. So presumably in beer also.
Yeah.
So we kind of figured it would be, if it was similar, it would work. So then when we did a very straight on the light oatmeal stout, and the only thing that we did differently was we keg conditioned it.
Okay.
But we did, active pressurized it with helium instead of doing carbon dioxide, instead of doing nitrogen. And then everything else was standard. And we were curious to see, because, there's a lot of like prank videos about helium beer,
Right.
people pretending
Helium
to
beer.
make it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
they use audio tricks, or they get a tank of helium and I'm like, well, it shouldn't be that hard. I can get a tank of helium from, the same welding supply shops outside of the city that anybody else can.
Right.
And so we did. Um, the long shot, the long and short of it is that it doesn't work any differently than nitrogen. But there was an interesting
it didn't
sort of
change your voice.
didn't change your voice. There wasn't enough dissolved in there. It was just a really expensive way to make a nitrogen brew in most respects. But there was an interesting, weird thing that happened, because when we first cracked it open, and we got our video team out there, we took a video of it, everything, and there was some, it was very much like a Guinness. We even opened up a Guinness right next to it, with the widget inside.
Yep.
After we were done with the article, we then brought it to parties a couple different times just to show off that we'd made this helium beer. So we had our keg and we had our helium tank, and we just sort of trucked it along. Every time we cracked it open, we got less and less head when we poured it. And that sort of puzzled us, because me and another chemist that were sort of doing this. What we eventually figured out is that we were purging out the remaining carbon dioxide, because we did put it, we didn't sanitize it before we put it into the keg or anything like that. So it had some of that. You could have keg conditioned it as it was.
Right.
So we had some fermentation. So I think in that first time we cracked it open, we actually had a mixture of carbon dioxide and helium as our gas, which is what they use, in nitro brews, really.
Yeah, yeah, it's a combination. It's just for nitrogen ones, they tend to amp up more nitrogen in it and less carbon dioxide. But yeah, your typical beer gas is a mix of carbon dioxide and nitrogen to begin with. So
yeah. So yeah, I think then every time we opened it up, we were sort of purging it out. And so less and less proportionally carbon dioxide every time. So the last time we did it, it was a totally flat beer, really.
Totally
so it
flat
turns out
beer.
that you really do need that carbon dioxide support, even with a nitro brew, to get that creamy head.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, typical home brewers don't have beer gas. They typically have carbon dioxide, which will add to the sharpness and the bitterness of your beer. So you have to kind of accommodate that when you're crafting your recipes, make it just a slightly bit more sweet than you might think you might need to, unless you're one of those people that has access to actual beer gas. I mean, and you could. It's just that most of them is commercial stuff, so you have to either have a commercial account or know somebody who'd let you come in as a consumer and buy it. So like myself and most homebrewers I know, we go to like the fire supply stores and get our tanks refilled. So it's just carbon dioxide. But yeah, I actually have some Intertap style taps. And I have a nozzle that I can swap out on mine that simulates nitro brew. So it's got a series of plates in this nozzle with different size holes in them, spaced out differently. So the beer gets forced through, and it causes it to have like that same kind of, that cascading effect you get from nitro brews. Yeah, it does that with just standard carbon dioxide, and it's not exactly the same, but it's close enough for me that I don't have to spend the extra $30 to get the same size tank of beer gas that I would for the carbon dioxide. So
yeah, I don't know if it's regional or not. I mean, around Baltimore, I didn't have to like prove anything to the people. It was just like Robert's Oxygen, which is I don't know how broadly they go around. They were happy to sell me helium, and they had a nitrogen. Like they would do any mix. I mean, it's a bigger shop for the area, but if anyone's really wants to get into some beer gas, it might not be too high of a barrier. I didn't need a special license like you would with some of the more active gases. Like you want oxygen gas, you're not just walking out with that. But
Right. Well, you know what's funny is around here, like I know I could go to like a welding shop and get a small canister of
yeah,
oxygen if I wanted to oxygenate, like if I was
I guess that's
oxygenating
true.
my
Yeah,
wort or things like that. But if you want the large quantities, yeah, you have to be a commercial, either a commercial brewer or
yeah,
have like a medical need or something like that. But there are companies that specialize in beer gas, so they
right.
pre-mix the carbon dioxide and the nitrogen for you, and they'll fill your cylinders
Oh,
or
interesting.
replace your cylinders. So, and they typically tend to be more aimed towards the commercial people. So,
Yeah, yeah.
but
Huh.
so helium beer, yeah,
Helium
like
beer. Yeah.
yeah. So what was the body of the beer similar to the Guinness Draft?
It was similar. I mean, it was. It didn't. I mean, the Guinness Draft cans. It's a real like thick, like you said, coat your mouth. The one we made didn't do as much of that, even though it was a an oatmeal coffee stout. It didn't sort of linger as long, in your mouth after you swallowed. I mean, it's a home brew, and my brewing partner on that is a very good brewer. Um, but yeah, so we had a little bit more, a little bit more cereal flavors, as you'd imagine, since it was an oatmeal. I didn't really
Right.
remember getting much coffee flavor off of it. I got more of like the bittery, toasty kind of a notes.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, the oatmeal should have well, I just poured an oatmeal stout here just a
right.
couple minutes ago because I finished my porter. I mean, and the head is hanging around, and that's what oatmeal
Mhm.
does for you. It causes that head to hang around. It gives it that nice creamy mouth feel and causes the head to linger. So, but
I mean, back when I was in chemistry undergrad, we did a whole project and we talked a lot about how foam is a protein thing in most cases of beverages. Is that true for beer as well? Do you know? Or I don't know off the top of my head.
I assume it is. I mean, there's I think there's higher amounts of the proteins that cause the foam to stick around in oatmeal than there are, and then there are malts that
Yeah,
are made specifically to aid in head retention and things like that.
that
And
makes sense.
it probably is protein chains. I'm not sure.
This is not on purpose, but that actually makes an interesting segue into another one that I did. I didn't get to brew any of this myself, but I did a whole thing on the gluten reduced and gluten free beers.
Okay, that's always a good topic because that is a large portion of the population these days. People who are
Yeah,
gluten
seems like it.
intolerant, and so
Because I mean, you get your sort of your two sort of ways to do that is to start off not using barley because barley has gluten.
right,
So you use a rice. I mean, I guess you could use an oatmeal. I don't think
sorghum.
oatmeal, sorghum. Yeah, sorghum's a lot. I didn't care for the sorghum beers. That taste, that sort of
Yeah, it's
molassesy thing.
I mean, it would be fine. That molasses would be fine in, say, your stouts and
Mm,
your porters. But if you're trying to make a non-stout or porter beer and you're using sorghum and it's going to
yeah.
have that molasses flavor, it's going to be kind of weird.
I wonder if it would fit into like a sour style, possibly too.
Um, I don't know. I never
Mm,
really thought about it. I mean, I guess it depends. It might, and it actually might work in a Belgian style beer, the
yeah,
sorghum. But I don't know about actual classical sour style beers. I mean, because
yeah,
they tend to be more towards the acidic side. So it's going to be
true.
like your citrus fruits and things like that.
Yeah. And then the other way you can do a gluten reduced beer. This is actually an FDA designation of gluten free beer versus gluten reduced beer, but it's using enzymes. So there's a brewer's Clarex, and I don't know if it's available in the homebrew market or if it's mostly a commercial brewery thing. But it's an enzyme that it was marketed originally to reduce haze, because part of the haze, well, most of the haze is proteins that are
Right. That are
suspended in
hanging
solution or
around. Yep.
crash out of solution, which either you want or you don't, depending on your style. Um, but with this brewer's Clarex, it'll chop up the proteins into pieces that are small enough that they can't make a haze. Doesn't actually remove them exactly, just makes them no longer make a haze. But if you hit it really hard with that enzyme, you can chop up gluten.
Hmm.
Um, but the question remained, do you chop it up into small enough pieces that whatever is causing the celiac that inflammation, those responses, no longer recognizes that protein and has a problem with it. And
Right.
that's where the
Right.
jury is still kind of out.
Which is why it's reduced and not
Yes,
free.
exactly. I mean, some of the, one of the brewers, which is like Omission, is one of the big people, and they're a subsidiary of some other. I don't remember who makes Omission. They're like parent company.
No
But
idea.
anyway, the person that started it because his wife, they found out she was celiac, had celiac, I should say, and they drink, the enzyme gluten reduced beer all the time, and she is apparently fine.
Yeah. But unfortunately, anecdotal evidence isn't
Yeah.
something that they'll that any scientist or organization worth their salt will accept.
Very true. Yeah. And one of the tricks of it is that the analytical chemistry tests you do to test for gluten, I think they're going down to about like 10 parts per million now is like the detection limit. That's as sensitive as the instrument is. But it's not clear, is that the limit above which you start to see a reaction in people with celiac and intolerances.
Right.
And that's not as clear. And it's probably different from person to person too.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's individual body chemistry is going to play a part in that, and how much or how sensitive they are to it could be more or less than what the you could go buy something that's quote unquote gluten free, and if you're super sensitive, it might still affect you. Who knows? Luckily, I don't have to worry about that. The only thing I'm allergic to is hard work.
Yeah, I don't have celiac. In my wife's family, there are some people that have celiac, and some always like, we have an eye on it with our kids because we have four daughters. They're not drinking age yet, so But at some point, I want to share a beer with them. Dang it!
That's right. So do you brew at your house, or do you just brew with friends on occasion, or what's your situation, Craig?
These days, I've been a little bit lazy because so I'm in a Baltimore row house. It's fairly big for a Baltimore row house, but I don't have a lot of space to really have a proper brewing setup. So in recent years, I've done a lot of ciders and not very many beers. Because with a cider, you don't really have to do a boil.
That's right.
You can use
you can use off the shelf apple juice.
You can, yeah. And I've gotten some of the best ciders I've made have been just like take a jug without the preservatives. You got to find the ones that don't have the preservatives.
Right. Yeah. You're best finding like an organic apple juice of some sort. Yeah. My wife is big into ciders, and she brews her own cider on occasion, and she brews her own meads on occasion. But yeah, she just went to the store and she bought 15 gallons of organic apple juice. The lady at the grocery store looked at her kind of funny when she was putting all this apple juice up there, and then we bought a couple different types of yeast and because there's enough sugar in apple juice that man, it just goes crazy and makes cider.
Yeah.
But yeah, you don't have to boil it.
Yeah. I'll usually chuck some hops in there, kind of dry hopping effectively. Obviously you don't have to for a cider. I just like my ciders hoppy.
Yep.
I did figure out.
You said you like things a little bitter, so
I do. I figured out a good trick though, because one of the flaws you often find in a cider that you also don't want in a beer, so it's not much of a problem, is that sort of sulfury smell.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of those flavors. So copper, like metallic copper, will react with hydrogen sulfide, which is a big part of that sulfur smell, and strip it out. So these days when I'm doing a cider, I'll take a copper mesh. You got to get the real copper mesh. Like the stuff that's covered in copper at the grocery store will not necessarily do the trick. But you got to get the real.
You're saying I can't use a handful of pennies?
Probably don't want to. Pennies are also real gross. So there's that. I use fresh, new copper wool, which you can get on the internet or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, I'll rack it over that, and I'll put some hops in that too, because I like the hops again. And that will actually strip out a lot of that sulfur smell. A lot of cider brewers will just wait, and that works too.
Yeah.
Or they'll just let it settle out, the mellowing.
Yep.
But running it over some copper will strip it out. You don't have to wait as long.
Interesting. That's things you learn when you talk to people who know about chemistry.
We're handy every once in a while.
That's right. I tell people I'm useful in very, very specific circumstances. I make a perfectly good bad example, and I'm usually right half the time. So I'm no better than statistically taking a guess, but hey, you're more than welcome to take my advice. So how long have you been doing the reporting thing in the chemistry world, Craig?
Let's see. So there's two answers to that question. One is that I've been with the magazine. I've been wearing the jacket. It's also a nice, comfy coat.
Look at
But
that.
I've been with the magazine since 2011.
Okay.
But the first 8.5 years or so, I was in the production department. So I would write occasionally. In the helium beer, I did sort of on the side while being in the production department. So that's like editing and all the back end things, to make what
The
was at the time.
non-glorious jobs.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fun job, but it was also, what was nice about it is the work always came to me. I didn't have to go find anything. I just sort of showed up. There was stuff. I did it, and then I went home.
Right.
And then in February of 2020, which was an awesome time to start a new job, I moved over to become a reporter in the business group because the previous person in my beat retired. I went to one reporting trip, a month after I started to PitCon, which is an instrumentation conference. And the story I wrote from there was, "Hey guys, no more conferences. We're done for a while. Everyone."
Right.
Yeah. So I've been reporting on full time, at the same magazine since then. So about almost 3 years now.
Man, it's got to be tough though. Trying to be a reporter of any sort in a time when you can't really go places and talk to people.
It's been weird. I mean, because it was the only world that I knew for all of 2020. I was like, I guess this is how you be a reporter. But now that I can travel somewhat, it makes a huge difference because I go to these conferences now or meetings or other events, and people know who I am and they say hello, and I recognize them. And then when I try to cold call them to talk to me about stuff, that they'll actually answer, which in a way that they hadn't before. My best chance before was to just send it to the PR person at the company and hope for the best. Whereas now I can hey, Marcelo,
Yeah.
talk to me.
Yeah, you've made some inroads into and some networking. Yeah, which is always. I mean, that's got to be the hardest part for people in any sort of reporting type job. I mean, be it in the chemistry world, be it like the tech world, all that stuff.
Yeah.
When everything's shut down, if you're just trying to get yourself established and you don't have those inroads already,
Mm-hmm.
that had to be tough.
I imagine so. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you imagine so you went through it.
Well, that's true. Yeah. I mean, I did. You're right.
Craig's already toasted, folks. He's had too much beer already.
Speaking of which, so I should open up this pistachio biscotti imperial stout, you think? Or I've got or even weirder marshmallow coffee stout for my second one here.
Oh,
I'm not going to do all three. That would be way too much.
Right. I think is the did you say the marshmallow one? Is that an imperial?
Marshmallow doesn't really specify imperial versus not. It says it has lactose in it.
What's the ABV?
ABV on this one, 6.4.
Okay, not imperial.
Okay, now the pistachio one here. What do we got? It's under the sticker from the liquor store.
Of course.
Oh, here you go, 8.2. Yeah.
So that one, I think 8.0 I think is the cutoff for imperial. So
yeah, this is what my homebrew shop became. Unfortunately, they shut down the homebrew shop, which is a huge bummer for Baltimore. Because now, I mean, there's a nice homebrew shop in Columbia, which is kind of a suburb that DC and Baltimore share.
Right.
But we did for like 5 years to have this really good homebrew shop right here in the center of Baltimore City. But the business model there didn't work out. They wanted to do more brewing and less selling brew supplies. So
yeah. I mean,
still a great tap room, but
hey, as long as you can still get good beer there, that's all that really matters. So is that the one you went with? The
yeah, I'm going to do the pistachio imperial stout. Oh, here's an interesting trend that I talked to. One of my regular beer sources is Dana Garves. She's the main person at a company called Oregon Brew Labs. And that's a company, you can send them your samples and they'll characterize it for you. They'll do IBU, ABV, anything you want them to test it for, basically. Both for your own knowledge and if you need to do FDA registration, she can handle that stuff for you.
Right.
Yeah, she's a chemist by training, but one of the trends that she's seeing that I asked her about, I asked her to tell me her trends. You're going to see some more imperial stouts, but you're going to see them being called Ukrainian imperial stouts, not Russian imperial
Right,
stouts.
right. Well, you know what's funny is a lot of the breweries that I frequent have stopped calling them Russian imperial stouts, and they're just calling them imperial stouts,
Yeah.
or they're just calling them RIS. So
Huh.
they're not actually calling them. You know, they're
I've
calling
seen
them.
that.
Yeah. So to pull the word Russian out of
Yeah.
the everyday language, yeah. But I could see, you know, Ukrainian imperial stout. All right, I
Yeah.
could get behind
Roll
that.
with it.
I mean, I love a good impy. I just got 3 delivered today.
Yeah.
I posted on the socials. Local brewery, well, regional brewery for me, not local for me. They're in the Toronto area too,
Hmm.
because there's not a whole lot that does imperial stouts around me. There's a couple breweries, but
Yeah.
because I'm out about an hour and a half outside of Toronto, so I'm in a smaller town.
Okay.
Don't get me wrong. I've got within 30 minutes of me, I've got I think 6 to 8 breweries, and if I
Nice.
put that out to an hour, it goes up to like 24 or something like that. But
I'll keep it busy.
yeah, Muddy York, same company that the porter I had was from. They have a yearly release called Inkwell, which is their
Huh.
imperial stouts.
All right.
Yeah. So they did one that was aged in brandy barrels, one that was done in sherry barrels, and one that was done in Sauterne, which is I think
Hmm.
that's how it's pronounced. It's a French sweet
Oh,
French
okay.
wine barrel. So and it's a limited thing. You know, they only have so many. I actually got in on the pre-order, so I made sure I
Nice.
got all 3 of the styles. Yeah, and I haven't had them before. They come highly recommended from some of my beer friends that I've made since I've moved to Canada. So I'm looking forward to. I'm going to crack one of them this weekend, I think. And
Yeah.
so, but yeah, I love a good imperial stout. I mean, I'm very happy in the double digit ABV. And these new ones that I just picked up, the Inkwell ones, they come in at 11.9, so they're well into the double digits.
It's pretty substantial. Yeah. I'm not noticing one difference with this is the head vanished pretty quickly on this one.
Yeah, must be whatever malts and
Yeah.
things they're using must not have a whole lot of head retention. And
Yeah.
I mean, it could be because it's lower. If it's an imperial, it's probably been barrel aged. If
Mhm.
even if it hasn't been barrel aged, it might have been conditioned long enough that it's lost some of its carbonation.
That makes sense.
So
Yeah. Yeah. And this place is just up the street, so they're going to be canning on the line there. Um, yeah, it's nice. I mean, it is definitely a lot sweeter with a lot of a sort of a thicker, chewier kind of a mouthfeel to it.
yep.
But it's not overwhelming with the sweetness. I'm pretty pleased. This
And are you pulling the pistachio flavor out?
only a little bit, only a little
Yeah.
bit of pistachio. I'm getting. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, there's just some general nuttiness. I'm not getting a whole lot of pistachio to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I think of like a bag of pistachios. I'm not seeing that as much.
Yeah, and I'm not really surprised because I think that's a kind of flavor that would get overwhelmed
Yeah.
unless you used a whole crap ton of it. The beer I'm currently drinking is Foley Brothers Brewing out of Burlington, Vermont. It's the Longbeard's Oatmeal Stout. It's very
Okay.
tasty. It's I mean it is your classical oatmeal stout. So it's smooth. It's got a nice medium high body to it. So it's not like
Mm,
super thick like an imperial stout, but it's much more than say the porter.
yeah.
And it's it's caramel and it's chocolate and there's just a tiny bit of roasty like coffee flavor just in the very back. Um, and the oatmeal gives it a nice creamy mouthfeel,
Mm,
which is great. I wish I would have bought more. We went to visit some friends um, earlier this year in Boston, and they had a fantastic little liquor store over by their house that had stuff from all over New England. So
nice.
I was like 2 of these and 2 of these and 2 of these, and some of them I'm like, man, I wish I would have got like 6 of those and
Yeah.
12 of those.
Now I'm getting the biscuit. So they have it called a chocolate pistachio biscotti imperial stout. Is the full description. I'm getting the biscuity. It's kind of I think the speculoos cookies like you get on the airplane. The
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
it's got some of that going on. It's nice. It's working for me.
Yeah, we actually have a little store down the street from us that sells so it's a Dutch market because
Hmm.
where I live is predominantly Dutch people, and they actually have a
Okay.
speculoos cookie spread kind of like a
Nice.
Nutella,
I can
but
imagine that.
yeah, and it's dangerous, man. You just start slathering it on. You're like, yep, I need more of that.
Yeah.
It's like, you can have a nice piece of thick rustic bread with a shitload of cookies on the top of it, basically.
Sounds all right.
So what is the name of the publication you work for again, Craig?
So it's called Chemical and Engineering News.
Chemical and Engineering
And
News.
we cover kind of anything that touches chemistry, which is like most things, honestly.
Right.
We can cover it. My area is called specialty chemicals, which sort of means everything that isn't a commodity. Like, I'm not going to cover ethylene, but I'll cover Brewer's Clarex or laundry pods or.
So were you part of the Tide Pod challenge then, Craig?
I didn't. I mean, okay. So here's what happened. So I did a story recently about laundry pods. That's why the one came to mind, because there was some controversy about the films, whether or not the films were really biodegradable.
Okay.
And it looks like the evidence for them being biodegradable is pretty strong. It's probably not, instantly gone as soon as it's going to make some of it's going to make it through the water treatment process, but it's a pretty chewable polymer by microbes. But I bought a bunch of laundry pods to like try and make a photo illustration for it. I tried to or assemble them into a question mark. And the art director didn't like that photo at all, so we didn't use it. But as I was cleaning up, I licked my fingers, and they're so bitter, and that's on purpose. They have like a bittering agent in the film to discourage the Tide Pod challenge. And it is literally the bitterest substance ever discovered by humanity. It's called Bitrex. And I knew that intellectually. I didn't think about it, but then when I tasted it, I was like, "Oh, okay, it's awful."
It's like when you're in the kitchen and say you're chopping hot peppers and you don't think about it. You do one of these, and you're like, "Oh, that was the worst mistake of my life." And your one eye is crying for like an hour because you just rubbed just a tiny bit of capsaicin in there. Yeah. Yes, I understand.
Yep.
Yeah. The Tide Pod challenge and all those stupid internet challenges that people do just absolutely floors me that people are that fucking stupid. Oh, this sounds like a good, like, what was the last one I saw was like something of the NyQuil chicken challenge or something like that.
I did hear about that.
That's like, what the hell is wrong with you people? Why would you ruin chicken by cooking it in NyQuil? Who likes NyQuil?
I mean, I'm trying to imagine even like a grape fried chicken still sounds terrible, even if it wasn't NyQuil.
Right. Well, can you imagine if you're doing like chicken with the green NyQuil? Ooh.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's not even that crappy cherry flavor. It's whatever that green flavor.
I don't even know what that's supposed to
be. Yeah, it's nasty. That's what it's supposed to be. Well, awesome, Craig. We have been talking for 42 minutes.
Okay.
And this is the part of the show where I go, hey, this is the end of the show. So if people want to find you out on the internet, how do they find you, Craig?
I am Craig of Waffles on most social media, including Twitter. I'm on Mastodon, LinkedIn. I'm just my name. So yeah, Craig of Waffles is how you find me.
Craig, is it because you really like waffles?
If you have time for a little tangent, but I didn't grow up having Eggo waffles in the house. I was sort of vaguely aware of them. So my friends started calling me Craig of Waffles, like as a nickname, and I had no idea what they're talking about. But I was familiar with in songs, in the church, they'll do O apostrophe, meaning like of, when they need to fit the meter for the rhyme scheme. So I thought for some reason all of my friends in elementary school just associated me very closely with waffles for reasons I didn't understand. So that's what Craig of Waffles is harkening back to, an elementary school nickname.
That's hilarious, because you didn't know what an Eggo waffle was.
No
so
idea.
You had no idea that Craigo waffles was just a riff on that. That's absolutely fantastic, man. All right. That's a perfect spot to end the show.
Well, thanks for having me on. This is really fun.
Yeah, no, I love shows that are a little bit different. We talked beer, we talked a little bit about chemistry, we talked about the prank helium beer and how you actually pulled it off. That's pretty damn cool. But this is the end of the show, so this is where I say, hey, I'm Rob from the internet. Cheers.